Howdy, everybody. So, in order to succeed as a truck driver, as an owner operator, I found in my 10-year career so far that you really got to seek out other successful owner operators. And you need to surround yourself with the best possible people you can find. Um, there's a lot of drivers out there that are real jokers or clowns or what, they don't take it seriously. And, they are more of a distraction than a resource. I think when you look at people that you want to network with, for example, is that person going to help you become successful, or are they, going to energy that you could have spent better on focusing on your business. You really have to focus. This is not something that you can do casually. You can't be a small business owner and just be a complete clown the rest of the time. I think it's too challenging to try to make a profit, that you can't waste time screwing around. you know and you can't waste time dealing with people who are not interested in becoming success on their own as well. If you surround yourself with a bunch of drivers who are going nowhere, guess what? You're going nowhere too. It is the old adage, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. So if you have good friends who are successful, then odds are, that's going to rub off on you and you too will become successful. It's not guaranteed, but it's much more likely. You know, uh, Oftentimes when I'm networking with other drivers on Facebook, for example, and, very, very particular about who I associate myself with, is because I don't have a lot of time to waste on a bunch of BS on Facebook or social media. I mean, if they want help, or if I need help, we help each other. But we don't participate in a lot of the garbage that you see in other Facebook groups or trucking groups. That it's just a complete waste of time. Those guys are not serious. Uh, they're going nowhere with their careers. If you want to reach higher and higher levels and become the best driver you can be, and become somewhat elite in your skill and your trade, master your skills, you gotta find those other drivers who are already masters of the trade. You gotta learn from the best. Okay. As an owner operator, I didn't know it. I didn't know anything. I didn't know a whole lot of anything. But there were many other owner operators who did, that helped me along the way. So these are the types of people you want to network with, because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to follow the path that was blazed in front of you. You don't have to be a pioneer. You just need to recognize those guys who've become successful, and then adopt some of the techniques or ways that they did it, and follow the path towards success. But here's the thing, out of a hundred owner operators, there's probably only a handful that are really on top of their game. The other ones, they're just not as good as the top tier owner operators. So you got to kind of filter your own personal filter. What do you look for in other drivers before you decide whether or not to network with them or ask for their help? If you go the least common denominator, you're gonna you're gonna surround yourself with a lot of people who waste your time. You know, it's the people pleaser. It's the guy who has no standards, right? They want to be friends with everybody. Well, as a small business owner, that's a recipe for disaster. I would suggest you don't be friends with everybody, that you do have standards, and you do screen people out, that don't meet your standards. It's like, you know, why would I want to spend any time with you whatsoever if, you're just completely wasting my time? If you don't spend your time wisely, what makes you think you're going to spend my time wisely? you know, if you don't take yourself seriously, you're not going to take me seriously either. And this is the things that you got to think about. It takes a good owner operator to sharpen another owner operator. It really does. And if you can network with good owner operators, they'll get you there. They'll see your rough edges, and they'll help sharpen your skill set. But if you surround yourself with dim-witted, nitwits, then a dull blade is going to stay dull. One dull owner operator is not going to sharpen another dull owner operator. It just doesn't work that way. You know, you want to become the best you can, surround yourself with the best people you can find. And together you'll lift each other's up to higher and higher levels. But if you surround yourself with a bunch of garbage, you're wallowing with the pigs. You're never gonna fly like an eagle. You see these inspirational memes on Facebook all the time. It's like, if you want to reach higher and higher levels, you got to get out of the mud. You got to get out of the crap. You know, too much time. You know, uh, just dealing with poor quality people. It's going to bring you down. It really is. You got to search for high quality people instead of being the lowest common denominator. You got to have the highest common denominator. You got to set your standards high, very high. And if there's 500 people on Facebook, for example, you don't need to network with 500 people. You need to network with 5 people. So how are you gonna choose 5 people out of 500? You're gonna have standards. You're gonna have to filter the good from the bad. You're gonna have to choose. And this is difficult for some people. Because they're like, look, we're all the same. We're all human. All this, that, and the other. Well, that may be true, but some of us actually want to be successful, and others do not. Some people like the status quo, and others are always reaching for higher and higher levels of success. If we're gonna accept everyone and strive for the lowest common denominator, you're never going to be successful. You're just not. Because the low is always going to go lower. You think that's low. Wait until the next thing that comes along. It's even lower. So it's like, look, um, that this isn't going to help you. This is a complete waste of time. You need to find people with high standards, so high that it challenges you. If their standards are so high that they're looking at you like you're not meeting their standard, that's probably the person you want to network with. Because they've already gone through this process where they're very picky about who they are friends with. And they do that because there's a lot of wisdom in that. That's like, you know you know can I learn something from you, or can you learn something from me? Can we challenge each other to do better, higher standards? This is what you want to do. Over time, you're going to find that your personal growth will be on like a continuous path of improvement. You'll continuously improve. And then you look back, after a few years at those other you used to know, and they're still in the doldrums, wallowing in despair. Just like they never, they never climbed out of the mud. They just stayed right there. Evidently, they're comfortable there. They made the filth their home, and that's not the way to go. You want to try to do much better than that. Much better than that. If you want to be among the best drivers out there, then you got to have standards. You just do. I mean, if you don't have any standards, then you're going to let a lot of low quality people in your life, and it's going to bring you down. Absolutely. So I would say you want to grow, you want to become the best person you can, reach out and network with the best drivers that you can find. Reach out to the best people you can find. Because it's only going to lift you up. You hang around with low quality people, they're just going to bring you down. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.